there was a warning that came out of Kentucky from the federal government that I would argue was extremely quiet. If you weren't looking for such warnings, you probably wouldn't find it. It definitely didn't make the news. It's definitely kind of a dig deep type of warning, but it's a very significant one because this particular warning comes from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, ultimately saying that on September 6 in Helton, Kentucky, at a coal mining facility, they were going to demolish a building and the Big Laurel #1 prep plant. And contained in that building was nuclear gauges. And when they went in to remove those nuclear gauges, that particular holding facility had clearly been broken into and the nuclear gauges were gone. Now, what's the big deal about nuclear gauges being gone? Well, as it turns out, this warning just came out yesterday because of what they've been finding because of these gauges. The problem with the gauges is they also contain nuclear radiation. More specifically, they contain 700 millicuries of cesium-137, which, cesium's a 132 atomic weight, so 137 is very isotoped. It's very radioactive. And ultimately what this is putting out is around 7 rads of radiation per gauge, which gives you really about 46 rads of cesium-137 radiation. It's not clear whether they're level 3 or level 4 nuclear gauges. Level 3 is identified as most likely not going to cause acute radiation syndrome, but level 4 could definitely cause acute radiation syndrome. So what they had 6 of these. Now, the reason it's just now kind of coming out as a warning is because 5 of them have been recovered at a scrapyard. Cut up is how they described it. It could be some backwoods guys just stole them and sold them for scrap. Could be. But it could be more than that. It's very vague as far as what they actually found, but the reason they found them was because radiation was being emitted from this scrapyard because it was emitting radiation because there was at least one of them that still contained the radioactive, or at least part of the radioactive components still in that gauge. So ultimately what you have is you have 1 missing, you have 4 cut up, you have 1 slightly damaged, not really sure what's going on with it. So ultimately you have a good amount of radiation already being emitted in Kentucky, and big question mark on as far as where are the rest of these parts. What is somebody doing with them? I mean, chances are, if it is kind of a backwoods person just trying to sell it for scrap metal, that's very common. People, break into all sorts of facilities to sell copper, any type of metal that they can sell off, probably not realizing that these contain radiation. But it could be more than that. For sure, if somebody's cutting these up with their bare hands, they're probably going to end up in the hospital with acute radiation syndrome. And then a lot of questions will be answered at that point. But so far, all that's happened is a little bit of radiation is being emitted from this scrapyard where they found one of the devices a little bit cut up, and then they found 4 more completely cut up, and 1 is still missing. So there you go. Heads up from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission to you southeastern Kentucky people, that somebody took some radiation. And who knows what they're doing it. But my guess is they're local, but I don't know. I'm just making assumptions. I would be curious if you live in that area, if it's made the news there, because I haven't heard a peep about it. If it wasn't for the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission's warning, I don't think anybody would know. But I would be very curious if the local media at least is reporting on it, because this seems like something we should know about. So there you go, nuclear radiation, a little bit being emitted in eastern Kentucky, and a lot of it still missing. Any thoughts or insight, especially that insight you might have? Definitely put that below. Do want to take a moment and say that, if you are ever worried about radiation or nuclear war, that sort of thing, that you can actually purchase pills that will block that from getting into you. Definitely block it from getting into your thyroid, that sort of thing, from a doctor at U.S. Pharmacy. I'll put the link below. That's from Jace. But if you're in Kentucky and you have heard something about this, please put it in the comments below. The most important part of this channel, though, we take prayer requests, so don't ever, ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.